Welcome to the Lover of God video series. My name is Paul Breathen. This is the third video on the teachings of a relationship paradigm that I had developed that I'd like to share with you that I think is vital for your own Christian growth, your own understanding about relationships with God, with others, and with yourself. But before I get into today's teaching, I want to do a quick review from the previous video that we saw. There I talked about what is a relationship paradigm. What are those forces of nature or domains that govern relationships? And so we talked about a triangle that has four elements within them. That is love, good, evil, and will. And I described that love is union and connection between God himself, between ourselves and others, and actually love connection even with nature itself. And that this paradigm is constant in creation. That means that it's set. It's been there from the very beginning, before creation even began. And it's involved in all relationships that God has with us, with others, and with creation. The other elements are good, which are the ways of God, and God defines good. And if we follow goodness and we obey his commandments, then we will have life. And then there's evil, which is the opposite of goodness, which is, for example, betrayal or unfaithfulness, which brings death to the connection of love. Goodness brings life to the connection of love. And then finally we have the will, which is our intention and our freedom to choose between good, evil, and love. So today I want to talk a little bit about more than the triangle itself and describe some characteristics about the relationship paradigm that I think you'll find very interesting. This is the relationship paradigm, and where we left off, where we're looking at the four elements of a relationship. And I'd like to go on from here to talk a little bit about the triangle itself. The triangle is used in a lot of religious, illustrations, symbolism about spiritual things, both in Christianity and even other religions and even cults. The triangle has a significant meaning to it. And here it's described in this way. If you look down at the bottom of the triangle, it's like the base that rests on earthly things, the world as we know it today, this present moment. And the point of the paradigm and the triangle is the spiritual realm. So it acts as like a connection between the earth and the spiritual, the earthly and the spiritual. And this is important because out of this paradigm where you have these three or four forces of love, evil, good, and will, there is a connection between these two, which create what I call gateways or a portal between the spiritual realm and the earthly realm. And there are three gateways. And I want to talk about the first one, which is to evil, is the gate to hell or evil itself. It's a portal that opens up that people when we have this relationship paradigm, that depending on love, if you love evil, which is a force of connection, you actually open up a portal into the demonic or the place of evil, the realm of evil, so that spiritual beings have access through you to the earth, and you have access to spiritual or demonic forces through this paradigm of evil itself. And then the same is true for goodness, which I say is the portal, the gateway to heaven. Same thing. If you love goodness, or if you love God, especially goodness, you create a portal that opens into heaven. And this is where heaven can come down on earth. And Jesus talked about, pray that the kingdom of heaven come upon the earth as it is in heaven. Same thing for here. It opens the gate up where you have access to angels from heaven. Also, this is a portal where God can actually move down into on earth through you as a gateway in this relationship. And then there is a third gateway, which is often a mystery or misunderstood or not even aware of, a gateway to God himself. And that is the top part. So through loving the Father, and this is where the lovers of God come in, there is an opening that creates into the realm of dwelling with the presence of the Father. I believe that as a church today, we haven't fully entered into his presence. We are with him and we know him, but not in a form of completeness. And this is really important because in this paradigm, there's more that we need to experience. And it's something that God is moving the church into, is into a presence with him that is unending. It is a 24/7, every minute of every day of your existence here on earth, you can experience the presence in the actual realm of heavenly realms where God dwells, and that we can enter into, and that we can have this intimate relationship with him. And this is what I want to explain as we move along in these teachings, how that is done and what this is about. So you have three gateways: gateway to hell, gateway to heaven, and a gateway to Father himself. Something else that is very interesting is that in the Old Testament, Moses, it was claimed by, it's called rabbinic oral traditions. You have the written of the Old Testament where Moses wrote the Pentateuch or the Torah. And with that, there was this oral tradition that is also recognized by a lot of rabbis as being just as authentic as the actual Torah itself. But there is this tradition that Moses ascended into heaven during his time in the wilderness with Israel. Now, whether this took place in the tent of meetings that met outside the camp of Israel, where Moses would enter in and the cloud of God would come over the tent and he would actually have a face-to-face conversation with God himself. But this is an example, and this is in Deuteronomy 33, 7-9, where actually this portal we talked about of opening up between God's presence here on earth as well as in heaven, there's this point of access. And likewise, we see this in the life of Jesus when he went up into the mountain to pray, and he took his three disciples, Peter, James, and John, and all of a sudden, at some point when the disciples woke up, they realized that Jesus was speaking with Moses and Elijah, and God's presence was there. So once again, this is an access or a portal of entering into these spiritual realms where earth and heaven come together and they meet. And it's through this paradigm that you have this access. It's another thing interesting about Moses and the oral traditions. Moses, before he died, had a request to God, they said. And this is the request. It says, "Master of the universe, I ask of thee one favor before I die, that all the gates of both heaven and the abyss or hell be open, and people shall see that there is none beside thee." And this is an oral tradition in Rabbah, chapter 11, verse 8, that talks about this request. And it's interesting that Moses also knew about these gates that opened up into these realms. And he wanted the request that God would reveal this to the people. Of course, it was denied of him, and the gates were never opened. They were never revealed. But I believe that today, in fact, Christ himself, when he came, he also came and he revealed the gates and he allowed us to enter into this access. And this is the thing, is to restore the fellowship of the Father. So he said it in such things as, "The kingdom of heaven is within you." And then the Apostle Paul, who also knew about these realms, these connections, said it in this way. He said, "For he, God, rescued us from the domain of darkness and transferred us into the kingdom of his beloved Son." It's interesting. He rescued us from this domain, this evil force, part of the relationship triangle, He rescued us from this and allowed us to enter into the kingdom of heaven to his beloved Son. And this is in Colossians chapter 1, verse 13. And with it, Jesus gave us authority between heaven and earth. And he said, truly I say unto you, whatever you shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you shall loosen on earth shall be loosed in heaven. This is in Matthew 18:18. So once again, there's this connection between the earth and the spiritual realms. And lastly, according to Paul, Jesus opened the divine door of this relationship. He says this, therefore, if you've been raised with Christ, keep seeking the things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on the things of earth, for you've died and your life is hidden with Christ in God. So once again, there's this connection, there's this relationship, that through Christ, we're hidden in God, and we sit with him in heavenly realms. And once again, how can we be here on earth and sit with him in heavenly realms unless through this relationship paradigm we have this divine gateway that opens up between the spiritual realms or the kingdom of heaven coming on earth and we getting into the realms of the spiritual or the heavenly realms sitting with the Father himself through Christ Jesus. The greatest truth is that by accessing the gates, you will come to know that there is none besides the Lord. As Moses pointed out, and he realized that of all the gates, the one that leads to the Father himself is the greatest of all. In fact, dwelling with the Father is by far the most miraculous secret that's been hidden from mankind, but is now made available by the lovers of God, which Christ has brought this to us. So that is an amazing truth and something we'll talk more about. Right now, I'd like to end with this video and just to let you know that the next video we'll be talking about adding more pieces to the relationship paradigm, adding the issue of the soul, the heart, and the mind. And we talk a little bit about the will. And we'll completing the paradigm so we can understand the dynamics between those three and how they relate to relationships. So thank you and look forward to seeing you next time.